Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Valenti, and today I have the great honor of being joined by one of the best in the business, award-winning sportscaster, Anne Marie Anderson. Anne Marie, you've been quite the busy person lately. You're going around the world, you're covering the Volleyball Nations League. What's that experience been like getting to go around the world calling those games?
Sam, I'm happy to be here. It's a dream job. I'll tell you that. I've been broadcasting for so long. I don't think I've stopped for 35 years in terms of traveling and all that. But to be able to do this was the final Olympic qualifying event before Paris. And so to be able to kind of help call and see the excitement of teams as they were grinding to qualify for the Olympics was special. To do it in this year, Rio, Hong Kong, Bangkok, Poland was enormous. Last year, I was in the Netherlands because they do have this every year. I was in the Netherlands, I was in Turkey. I love traveling, I love seeing the world, and I love sports. So it's the perfect combination.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there somewhere in the world that you haven't been to yet that you really want to go see?
Yes, well, it is on the list, honestly. I believe I'm doing the World Championships for volleyball in 2025 in Manila, in the Philippines. The crowds there, they're such big sports fans. Um, I can't wait. Let's see where else. I've been a lot of places. Been to every continent other than Antarctica. Um, I mean, I'd like to get out to like the Seychelles and Mauritius just for vacation off of the coast of Africa. There's a few places, and I'm going to find sporting events there so I can have somebody hire me to get me out to those places, I think.
Do you think you'll ever take a trip to Antarctica possibly in the future?
No, only because I feel like I took my big adventure trips already, like where I'm really pushing myself physically. I climbed to Everest Base Camp many years ago. I've hiked the Dolomites. I've been down to the icebergs. Like I've taken a lot of physically super demanding trips pre-kids before I had my kids. And so I don't think I'm going to challenge myself with discomfort anymore. I earned that, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and no, as we've been talking here so far, you're a very adventurous person. Travel is such a big part of your life. And that sense of adventure you have, living life with no regrets, it was actually sparked by something very tragic, the passing of Peter Rogot. Of course, you wrote that great piece about it, and I encourage anyone who hasn't read it to go read it. But a few months after that happened, you took your first trip to Europe. What do you remember from that trip, and what sort of emotions were you feeling at that time? Just a few months removed from a day that had changed your life.
Sure. Well, for the trip, I just remember the feeling of the sense of wonder. What happened with Peter, for your listeners and viewers who may not know, is that he was a sports anchor in Colorado for whom I interned when I was in college, right about your age. And when I started working at ESPN out of college, I got very lucky to do that. Peter, a few years later, got his dream job as the anchor of Sports Center, one of the anchors of Sports Center. And before he ever went on the air, it was like his sixth day in the office. Peter passed away on the Sports Center newsroom floor, despite my best effort and my colleagues' best efforts to perform CPR and revive him. And Peter was a special guy. He was super nice. He was 37, really fit, newly married, and landed his dream job. And when Peter passed away, and I was right there with him, I remember having the thought, well, if you can be 37 and newly married and dream job to have it ripped away in a second, I'd never wait for anything ever again. And it was at that moment, as you point out, that I thought about what do I really want to do? What makes me happy? I love ESPN. I still work for ESPN freelance. And I didn't want to fix that part of my life. I wanted to look at the parts of my life when I wasn't working and enjoy them to their fullest potential. And Peter sparked that in me.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now let's get into a bit of your background. You attended Hofstra University, and of course, you had a great volleyball career there. Fran Califer was your volleyball coach, and the late Cindy Lewis was the athletic director there. What impact did those two people have on your life at Hofstra and then moving forward in your career?
Well, to have two women leaders, this was the 80s. I know, right? But this was the 80s. And to have two women leaders who were so strong and so sure of what they wanted to do and lead so confidently really had an impact on me. Because once you see it, then you can do it. And that really served me well as I was a producer at ESPN in the years following that. I just uh, learned to be confident in my positions from those two. It was, Hofstra wasn't what I planned to do. I was a decent player coming out of high school, and I was getting recruited out west for a lot of schools. I had conversations with Long Beach State and Hawaii and a few other schools, UCLA. I really wanted to go to Texas, but I broke my leg my senior year of high school. Back then, that's when we would sign and commit, and so my volleyball career was over. I couldn't play, and therefore coaches couldn't see me, and they kind of went away. But a few schools, like Illinois State, Rice, they were still interested, even though I was on crutches. They believed that I could get back. And so for Hofstra, I'd never heard of Hofstra, and I went out for my recruiting visit on crutches, and it just felt right to me. The excitement of being in that moment. And Fran and Cindy Lewis, as you talked about, only really added to that because I could see my future there, and it was different than I thought it would be. But here I was. I knew I wanted to work in journalism, and it was right there in the center of the hub in New York. So it worked out really well, and Cindy and Fran were a huge part of that.
What was the experience like, getting to be a captain on the team and being a leader?
I think people are either leaders or not, right? And not everybody can be a leader. You need people who will follow as well. Um, I don't know, maybe being the youngest of five and the only girl with four older brothers uh, made me a pretty good communicator early on and leading. So I was very comfortable. And when I went in to Hofstra, there was a senior named Sue Gades who was the captain that year. And then when she left and I was a sophomore, I was captain for the next 3 years because, one of the things about leading, and I know you'll get into it later that I'm a keynote speaker and an author and everything, but one of the things about leading that really strikes me is that you have to be a shapeshifter. You have to be able to shape shift to the person you're trying to lead. You can't lead everybody the same. And so I really embraced that idea of what makes Sam work, what makes, Robin excited, what makes Bill really energized. And on my team, the same thing. What motivates this person? Uh, what do they really love? Some people hate losing more than they like winning. Some people really want to get on the court, but they're not willing to do the work. So I think as a leader, as a captain, and then later on, my professional life in broadcasting, especially when I was a producer at ESPN for 16 years, being able to shape shift and make it about the people you're trying to lead rather than this is my leadership style served me well.
Well, at Hofstra, you were a communications major and you also minored in speech. Of course, those two things, they very much apply to what you do today. What
Yep.
were the most important things you've learned during your time at Hofstra within those two things, speech and communication?
Sam, that makes me laugh only because there's so many people in business that are doing something entirely different that they majored in. And I knew from a very young age, this is what I wanted to do. And as you know, being a part of an excellent school, Cronkite at Arizona State, those jobs are hard to come by. So I'll tell you in a minute, but I do remember this one moment sitting in a lecture at school and our professor standing up and saying, statistically, only one of you are going to have a career in television. And he was delivering this to 100 of us. And I remember that moment and looking around the room and going, oh, that's awful. Like, what are you guys going to do? because I never had a plan B. You know, I think that's one of the things you have to have when you're in communications and in television is a certainty that you're going to figure it out. Hofstra very specifically prepared me in a number of ways. I mean, you know, and I really admire what you guys do at Cronkite too, because they're really focused on work that you will actually do. And so we would actually interview and put together pieces. And years later, you know, we'd have 2 weeks or something. Years later at ESPN, I'm producing NFL coverage and it's post game. And I've got to get that on the Sports Center. And I have half an hour to get the interviews, cut it, and do it. You know, so just that kind of rudimentary preparation helped a bunch. And then speech, I hadn't really honestly, Sam, thought about it recently that I minored in speech, but now I'm a keynote speaker. So I guess that worked out well. Uh, and again, it's all about authenticity and connecting with your audience. But that's funny, Sam. I never really had thought had thought about that. But yeah, speech too. So as you said, everything I majored in is everything I'm doing. It's not that way for everybody, and people need to not panic if they're not researching right now what they want to do. It'll come.
Hmm. Now, after graduating, you started working at ESPN, and I actually want to talk about some of the content that you've created at ESPN. I
Mhm.
was looking on YouTube and I came across some feature stories you had done, exploring the darker side of sports. Some of these more difficult topics. What was it like reporting on those stories? Dealing with tough topics and stuff like that.
I'm very impressed by your research, Sam. So I think because of my ability to empathize and shapeshift, as I was talking about, I often got handed what I would call death and destruction assignments. Topics that were unusually sensitive whenever anybody was arrested, assaulted, jailed, had a sensitive subject. It seemed that a lot of times that would fall to me and some of my colleagues. So I think the thing that you're talking about, the piece that you watched, was probably about coaches abusing athletes in
Mm.
sports, right?
Right.
Pedophilia. Yeah, that was nasty. That was really tough. Um, and did you ask what was my experience with that, like
Yeah,
in covering?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I mean, for that particular piece, I remember sitting in a courthouse in Nevada. This is my first day on the piece because you kind of work backwards, right? It was in the courthouse that day, and it was victim impact statements. And having the man sit there and having the parents of these children who had been molested by him get up and address him face to face was very powerful. And sometimes the kids did it too. That story has never left me. One of my colleagues, because that was for Outside the Lines, one of my colleagues had a different piece within Outside the Lines where she went to the jail and talked to the molesters. I was talking to the victims and survivors. And you put those two things together, and it's something that shaped, well, it certainly has shaped my parenting. uh, Anybody who knows us or has ever watched our kids know that we talk about body safety rules openly. Like I learned every story I'm on, I learned things. So even when it's that dark, I learned all kinds of ways to communicate that, signs, prevention techniques, and I still think about those children who are now adults and wonder how their lives have been impacted. That to me, Sam, felt like work that matters. I love it all. I love the games. I love all of it. But when I can do something like that, that's different and so impactful and so sensitive, you know, I'm hoping there's some people out there that watched that then learned, okay, we're going to change things around a bit in what we do to try to prevent that happening to our child or our friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I also have a great appreciation for your work with Pac-12 Network, a network filled with, such great talent, great people. And gosh, I'm so sad that it's gone, no, because
Yeah.
I love watching it, of course, and as an ASU student. I have to ask, What are some of your favorite memories of covering games with Pac-12 Network in Tempe?
In Tempe. Okay, there's one that comes to me immediately. I was assigned to double dip. I had a soccer game followed by a volleyball match in the same day. And their timing wasn't that far apart, but it seemed like it would work, right? It was like a 3 o'clock game and an 8 o'clock game. But the soccer match, it was 92 degrees out, and it went into double overtime. So that kept eating up into my preparation time. And then there was the volleyball immediate after. So I literally ran from one to the next, sweaty and not looking at all, camera ready by the end of soccer. And just a short aside, I remember we had a stage manager. I think it was a student actually helping out, and I was sweating and everything. And I got there, and he was like, "Just let me know, if you need anything." And I said, "Water, be great." And he goes, "No, no, no, I'm fine, thanks." He thought I was offering him water when I was like trying to prepare for on air, and I just needed something to cool me down. And everybody was like, "What happened there?" I'm like, "That's bad communication by my part." Um, but Tempe is such a great place. And every time I was assigned to go there, and in the future when I'm assigned to go there, I always go for a hike. And it's not always Camelback, you know, it's it's not always, a mountain and all the, it's just getting out and really exploring nature. The people there are so friendly, they're so fitness focused. And they had, as you said, just tremendous appreciation for sports.
Yeah, what are you gonna miss most about the Pac-12 conference as a whole? As someone who covered just so many different athletic events with the conference.
Yeah, I miss the conference. I mean, it's a 100-year-old conference, and to have that go away was a big piece of history. And I think that's what has all of us who spent a lot of time working in that conference sad, uh, is that the conference itself, conference of champions, and all the, it was greatness. So to see that go away is really painful. Most of my colleagues that I worked with there are working in other networks now, which is great. So I don't think like on a professional level it impacts me that greatly. But on a personal level, I feel for all those athletes and alums who put their heart into the Conference of Champions, and now it no longer exists.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the book you have coming out in January called Cultivating Audacity: How to Dismantle Doubt and Take Bold Risks. What inspired you to write this book, and what's the writing process been like for you?
Well, the inspiration really came from something you and I talked about earlier, which is the death of one of my colleagues, Peter Rogat, at a very young age, just when he was starting his dream job. And I realized then that playing it safe wasn't going to get me anywhere in life. I needed to take bigger risks. I needed to take audacious risks so that if my life, took a turn or was cut short or whatever, I wasn't waiting for something. Waiting doesn't work. Um, and so immediately after that, you had mentioned that I started traveling. I also went to my boss and said, "Hey, I'd like to be Los Angeles bureau producer," because I didn't love living in Connecticut, where I was shoveling snow and I was working and all the time, and it was dark and it was cold. It just wasn't for me. It's gonna be beautiful, but it wasn't for me. And I wanted to live on the beaches of California and play volleyball when I wasn't working, and just have my days and nights look different. And so I went to my boss and said, "Hey, can I be LA bureau producer?" And he said, "We already have an LA bureau producer." And I was like, "I know. That's what makes this so awkward." It was like that audacious moment where you're like just asking for what you want finally. And he said, if we can't do it in 2 years, just stay 2 more years. If we can't do it in 2 years, then what have you really lost? And I said, 2 more years in my 20s. And so I gave him my notice, 3 weeks or whatever it was that he needed. And he called me impatient. And I said, "I understand." And I packed up, da na 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 na, Sports Center done. Literally just walked right out of the office into my car and started driving cross country. And that experience taught me a lot because I didn't know what I was going to do when I arrived in Los Angeles. I only knew I was going to be shoveling snow, but I had the courage and the faith that the risk I was taking was going to work out somehow. Maybe I wouldn't get another job in television, but that I'd be okay. And I think that's a big part of audacity, is understanding it's not about getting what you want. It's about knowing that you're okay if you don't, and that you'll figure it out a different way. And as it turned out, when I arrived in LA, ESPN hired me back and put me on a contract. And by the end of that year, ESPN was paying me double what they had paid me in Connecticut. So it definitely worked out. As far as the writing process for cultivating audacity, I'm a deadline person, right? Aren't we all in
Mm.
journalism, right? Give me a deadline. And so that's the first thing I said to my publisher was, thank you for trusting me with the process, but I need deadlines. I need somebody to really hold me accountable, because if you're going to tell me the manuscript's due in June, I'm not a procrastinator, but I got other stuff going on. And so who knows when I would start that messy process. And so they did give me an editor who said, hey, I need chapters 1 and 2 by this point. I need, 3 and 4 by this point. And I won't miss a deadline ever. It's just, after 35 years in journalism, it's all ground into me. So I hit those. And then the collaboration of, my editor goes through it and makes some changes, and then you do line editing where you're correcting on pronunciation, and the copyright editing to make sure everything's moving around. I mean, it's been a really interesting process, and one I've enjoyed, because I still want to grow, Sam. Like, I still push myself all the time to do things that are different. That's truly like audacity. Think about what it is that you want, and then what's in your way. There's 4 different barriers that are typically in somebody's way: fear, time, money, or that inner critic, negative voice inside. So, exploring that every time I feel like I want to do something, what's in my way, and then breaking down that barrier and going for it. That's cultivating audacity.
Yeah, I think it's really great that you got to where you are today, by taking those risks and not taking no for an answer. I mean, as you say, no means not yet.
Yeah. It's about recalibrating your relationship with rejection. For me, no means either not yet or next, because maybe this particular opportunity isn't going to work out for you. So I wouldn't keep pounding away at an opportunity once you reach a point where you've been told no by this particular person enough. And then it's like, next, either you're on to the next network, in this case trying to get them to hire you, or you're on to the next avenue. If you're trying to get into television, you're not having luck, but you're able to get into radio. Or if you're trying to become a play-by-play, but they first want you as an analyst. It's what's next that's going to lead me to where I want to go.
Yeah, and throughout your career, you've shown a lot of persistence. A really great story that you've told is how you got an interview with ESPN out of college, and Al Jaffe asks you if you can analyze the Mariners bullpen. And you didn't really know anything about the Mariners bullpen, so at first you didn't, get that production assistant job. But you know what? You were persistent and you wrote the letter and you ended up getting hired. I'm curious what other examples stick out to you throughout your career, throughout your life, where that persistence that you have has paid off.
You're a really good researcher, Sam. I'm very, very impressed. Yeah, the persistence paying off. I mean, one, I talk about the move to California, when I wanted to go on air. Okay, I was a producer at ESPN, a pretty good one. I produced 6 Olympic Games, heavyweight title fights, Major League Baseball, NBA. I was getting the great assignments. I loved that job, but I wanted to make the move to on camera, and I was doing it a lot later than most other people were. And I got told no, of course, a bunch. And I ended up going kind of backdoor, because ESPN at that time had this regional television that was like in Charlotte. It wasn't even in the main Bristol, Connecticut. And so I put together a reel of some work. My colleagues who were reporters and the photographer would let me jump in after they did a stand up, and I would jump in and do something. And I sent that to Charlotte, this regional person, and they decided that they wanted to hire me for regional football games, 8 regional football games. As a sideline reporter, it'd be a great place to get started. And my boss, my producing boss, said no. Absolutely not. You can, you're a producer here and you can either continue to produce our NFL, NBA, college football, work, or you can take these 8 games for a tiny bit of money and do that. And after thinking about it and remembering Peter and remembering Audacity, I thought, no, that's the direction I want to go in. I have to have faith that it's going to work out. And so I told my boss respectfully, like, no, I'm going to take the 8 games. And he, of course, said, like, that's crazy. And eventually he said, fine, I'll let you do both. But, so there I'd given myself a raise, right? By making a choice that wasn't based on money. That's a big one. When people make a choice based on money, or do things for the wrong reasons, it never leads to where you are. For me, it was about growth and something that I wanted to try, being on camera.
Yeah, for sure. You're also a fantastic keynote speaker, and I'm curious, what when you were doing kind of your first big public speaking engagement, talking to a large audience of people, what do you remember from that first experience?
Well, for the last 10 years or so, I have hosted the All America banquet at the end of the NCAA indoor volleyball season. And I don't know how to say it. Like, I don't really get terribly nervous for those things. I get excited for them. And I think part of my background as a producer makes me evaluate them. So I did the best I could. And then I went back and I took notes and said, like, okay, they laughed here. They didn't laugh here. This was too slow. I rushed here. For me, I just kind of dug into like the mechanics of everything. Now it's so satisfying. I'm so energized when I come off the stage because I'm helping people get where they want to do. There's a couple of different keynotes I do, and cultivating audacity is one where I'm pushing people right then to make the move. And sometimes they'll come up to me right afterwards and say, okay, thank you for this. I need to do this to my boss. I'm like, cool, pull your phone out. Let's do it right now. And just seeing the impact that that can have gives me a ton of energy. So it's almost like not as much about the time being on stage, but the impact and the waves it creates afterwards.
I also saw that you actually have some experience as an auctioneer, which I think is which I think is super cool. What was that like?
It was fun. They threw that on me right before the gala that I was hosting. And then we did it again this year. And actually, this week I just got hired for a third year going back. I mean, again, it's a new skill. It was fun. Um, and I like to speak with humor anyway. And so you can get that in as you go faster and faster, trying to get people to bid. And yeah, so I love it all. I love it all. For that, I almost get a little bit nervous because I want to raise money for the cause. And so I just push. I mean, we talked about all the other ways I push in my life, but when I'm pushing, that particular event is for developmentally disabled adults and this corporation that works with them. And if I know I'm raising money for developmentally disabled adults to, get a van or have an art program or have speech therapy, oh, it's on. Like, I will push and push and push. And I think their goal for the first year was 15,000 or 20,000 they wanted to raise. We raised 70,000. And they were like, whoa. And I'm like, you said you wanted to raise money. So we raised money. So that's why they keep hiring me back. Because, man, when the cause is like that, I'm all in.
Yep. And in addition to these great things that you've done in your career that we've been talking about, you're also a parent, you're a mother of
Mhm.
three. What has that journey been like for you, raising your kids and seeing them grow up?
It's tough, man. It is so tough. And I love it, but it's tough. I've got one in college, I'll tell you right now. And he came home for the summer and has been sleeping in this office, my office. And I looked in here today and I was like, oh my gosh, you have got to get your stuff out of there. So it never ends. It's been really satisfying though. And for example, my oldest son, every year he came on a work trip with me, every single year. And he would come to basketball games or beach volleyball or, water polo, whatever it is, but he would come on a week of assignments with me and a lot of indoor volleyball. And it turns out he ended up taking up volleyball later, and he's now part of a Division 1 team, very good top 10 team in the United States. And his coach tells me, like, he has such high IQ. And I'm like, well, yeah, he's been watching matches, tons of matches, hundreds of matches since he was 3. He just came back from Poland with me, which is another great part of that job we talked about for Volleyball Nations League, is that they allow me to bring my kids if I'd like. So we were in Poland, which is the best place in the world to watch volleyball. It's absolutely insane for the men's finals. And Lucas came out with me, and being able to share that with him is special. And I think for the kids, what I've tried to show them through the years is that preparation is your safety net. Just prepare. As you know, Sam, calling the game is the reward. It's the preparation ahead of time. And it's very clear to me that you've done the preparation for this interview. And so you spent a lot of time looking at those videos and researching and this and that. So the interview, I'm going to guess for you, isn't hard at all. Am I right?
Yeah, it's I've done quite a few of these,
Yeah.
and I enjoy it. Love that process of doing research stuff. I love it.
Yeah. So do I. Same thing. And now it's like, okay, even in this conversation, you have so much you can draw upon. And so you're all prepared. So then you can just relax and flow with where things go. It's the preparation is the work. And like you, I love it. I love getting on the call with a coach and having, the conversation about what are these little things. And so I brought my children into that, where I've had them help me over the years. Sometimes they'll help me prepare boards. Sometimes they'll come to practice and sit in with a coach call with me. They've just been able to see in whatever areas of life they go into that preparation is the key to being successful in whatever area you want to be.
Yes, absolutely. And last question here, just what is the singular biggest piece of advice that you have for aspiring sports journalists?
For aspiring sports journalists, I would say attach yourself to someone. Find someone doing what you want to do. And Instagram makes it all very accessible right now. And ask if you can shadow them. Ask if you can sit in a game with them. Uh, Everybody got to their position in sports broadcasting by someone helping them. That's just the way it goes. And I call that your front row. And by the way, in the book Cultivating Audacity, your front row are the people who just want to see you succeed, and they will cheer you on and they'll help along the way. And for anybody wanting to get into this business, it's tough. It's awesome. I've never had a day in 35 years I haven't wanted to go to work, and I mean that. So find some mentors and ask really specific questions. And you'll be amazed at how your knowledge increases, your communication increases, and your reach expands.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Anne Marie, what else can I say other than thank you so much once again for letting me have this opportunity to chat with you today. It was truly an honor.
It was a pleasure for me, Sam, as well. I wish you the best of luck going forward. I have no doubt it's going to turn out well.